Welcome back to Tartarian Tales 63, where we are going to be traveling through Siberia. Travels in Siberia, this book from 1848. Some amazing travels from obviously before that, and just some great descriptions, and again, more little tidbits of the Tartar, Buddha, Tibet connection. Because I think there is something there that we're still missing, and this just has a little bit of that, but it has a lot more. That's just one small part here at the beginning and in the middle, but there is a lot that this guy covers. He's got very good detail of what he sees, what he experiences, the people he meets, the customs he sees, the nature, the landscape, the spiritual aspect of it. It's good stuff. I really actually like this one a lot. I like all the readings that I share with you, and this one came out cool, and I've got another one to share with you after. And so I wanted to just show the Buddha mandala, this cool drawing of which I am doing a new kind of in that shape, that four-pronged mandala. I've got a new one coming. Wait till you see it. Tartarian-esque, but ancient and awesome and multidimensionally excellent. And these I have a bunch of collections of pictures that I'll show from various books, which I'll put some of the links down below that I can remember. And just an interesting collection of the Siberian peoples and some of the Google things that I found on there, Google Earthy things. But also, look at this. This is power source. Nothing connected to it, no wires, just things. Beams and little bulbs on it. And they were definitely tapping into this. Is Siberia. So this stuff was all over the place. God knows when and how and what it was able to do. Could be able to do a lot. Power things. Who knows? But this is the book, 1848. Excellent. I'm going to explore the parts that relate to the polar circle at some point if I can find them, and they're excellent. But we'll see. But this part related to the Tatars and the whole Mongols that he... all these different interesting things that you'll see. Here we go. We're going to start here on this page, but definitely check out the rest of the book and different parts of it. And even right at the beginning, he talks about being we found ourselves once more in Tara. That's the first line. In Tara, that's a Buddhist, green and white Tara, amazing Buddhist goddess and being, deity. So this connection it goes really deep, and I think it's very relevant to the Tibetan incidents that we've experienced in our lifetime and how that might have been the last stronghold of these spiritual masters. So here we go. Page 112, Travels in Siberia. Fortune-telling parties is the name of the chapter. January 12 and 13. At 10 in the morning of the 12th, we found ourselves once more in Tara, where I received the congratulations of all the town, nearly, on the fortunate termination of my recent adventure. Tara is situate upon a considerable height, one verst above the confluence of the Agarka with the Irtuish. The steepness of the declivity towards the water and the deep chasms produced in it by the action of the frost and floods give the entrance into the town a very picturesque character. I'd love to see what that was. The bridge, which was then under repair, is raised upon high piles in order to place it beyond the swelling of the river. Upon the eve of the New Year, 12th January, New Style, I received an invitation to the house of the captain of the district, where table songs, Polybudnai Pesny, literally dish songs as they are called, and fortune-telling games were entered upon with all the earnestness of old times by the ladies of Tara. All the young ladies, anxious to pry into their future destiny, place their rings in a covered dish and then commence the song, which is composed in short strophes, each involving some mystic and prophetic allusion to marriage or to riches. Meanwhile, the rings are drawn out of the dish separately by some of the elder ladies, and so that the prophetic expressions of each strophe are made to apply to some of the individuals engaged in the game. I have little doubt that this custom is borrowed from the soothsayers of the Mongol and Manchu tribes, among whom it is usual to place where the image of Buddha, as for instance in the Manchu temples at Maimachin, a basin containing written oracular sentences, portentous of good or evil fortune to the votaries who avail themselves of such intimations after prayer. The most conclusive evidence of this connection between the Buddhist ceremonial and the Russian incantations seems to be offered by the following stanza in one of the songs. Guess, O maiden, guess, in which hand is fate and the dragon's wing. These words, it must be avowed, necessarily bring to mind the dragon, which figures in the mythology of the Manchus, the Lo or Lu of the Mongols, and the Lung or Lun of the Chinese. The Mongols, for instance, represent the impersonation of their divinity with wings, and describe him as reposing in winter in the seven seas, and in summer mounting to the skies, controlling the seasons and imparting life to all nature. Nothing, therefore, can be more natural than to hear the dragon's wings introduced into Mongol poetry as the symbol of destiny. The adoption of a similar idea among the Russians is not, however, attributable to the Siberians, for the dish songs were familiar to the European part of the population long before conquest of Siberia. The reasonable conclusion in this, as in other instances already alluded to, is the existence of some previous, though long forgotten, intercourse between the Russians and Mongols, the Tartarians maybe. In point of fact, we know that the tribes under Chinggis Khan, who overran that country, were really a branch of the Mongol nation from the government of Irkutsk, who subsequently formed a union with the Tatar hordes. And to the latter, the Russian historians, in process of time, incorrectly attributed the whole glory of the conquest, of course. Several others of their divinatory practices still exist among ourselves, as for example where omens are drawn from the dripping of melted wax into water, and where the matrimonial prospects of the young women are foreboded by the manner in which little shells move, with regard to each other, on the surface of a vessel filled with water. In like manner, allusions are made in the ancient Russian bridal songs to the rolling of rings or beads of pearl across a piece of velvet towards the expectant lover. Their peculiar superstition, however, is the importance attached to the podslashivate, or listening. That is the import of particular words caught up outside a window from any conversation carried on within. That's amazing, because I always listen to those words in those sentences that I hear out of a crowd, the ones that sneak through. That is awesome. The loneliness of the situation where this, I'm going to read that one sentence again. Their peculiar superstition, however, is the importance attached to the podslashivate, or listening. That is the import of particular words caught up outside a window from any conversation carried on within. The loneliness of the situation where this appeal to destiny is usually made naturally exalts the inquirer's susceptibility of ominous impressions, for which reason the country girls generally station themselves in the bath chamber about midnight, where they expect to enjoy an interview with the apparition of their destined husband. The bath is regarded by the ignorant as the favorite retreat of the household sprite. It is at the same time easy to conceive that the fair votaries may at times be favored with meetings requiring no intervention of supernatural means or beings. I believe in the supernatural of all of that. I think these people, again, the writers, are always of their own opinion, and of the opinion that always seems to survive. So I like to take it from the opinion of who they're observing, and the alien view almost, what they think as. But could be right, who knows. The following evening, it fell to the lot of M. Filimemnov, one of the principal merchants of Tara, to entertain his fellow townsmen. Here again the numerous guests were amused with playing at forfeits and with national dances, which were made rather to assume the character of plays from the songs with which they were accompanied. These amusements were further enlivened by the sudden appearance of masks among the visitors, which gave the festival very much the air of the carnival, as it is usually observed in Catholic countries. Interesting, that's a universal thing, apparently. Here we go, January 14th to the 20th. At 5 in the afternoon, we remounted our sledges, and in 6 days found ourselves in Tomsk, after traveling over a distance of 800 versts. In the first village through which we passed, a superior degree of comfort was observable. The walls of the Gornitsa, instead of being distinguished from the Izba by a coating of whitewash, were neatly covered with paper hangings, which are manufactured by the convicts at Omsk. One of the ornaments of the apartment was a bright tea-urn, a samovar, which was placed at our command by the hospitable owners. And I've also noticed that there's a lot of this area is populated by convents, so something definitely brutal took place in the distance that was eradicated. In the course of this night, we crossed the Irtush for the last time, and early in the 15th found ourselves 100 versts from the town which we had just left. The commencement of the Baraba steppe, which we had now reached, showed itself in the more regular outline of the monotonous waste of snow. On the left of our route, near Kopayova, we passed close to one of the memorials of the aboriginal natives of the country. It was a barrow, or ancient tumulus, such as the Siberian Russians call a kurgan, of about 30 feet in height, and shaped like a bell. Wow, 30 feet in height and shaped like a bell. We found none but Russian settlers in all the villages, their former occupants having retired northwards after the game. A few of the descendants of the latter, however, remain but are no longer distinguishable from the Russians. In Tokrovsko Selo, 250 versts beyond Tara, I succeeded in making a magnetic observation, and here I also encountered one of the Ostiaks who occupy the country to the northward of the steppe. He had come to exchange peltry for flour and other Russian products. His dress alone was sufficient to distinguish him from an Ostak of the lower Obi, being made of the long-haired skin of the wild goat, not of the reindeer. The color of the goat is a yellowish white, never presenting the varieties observable in the reindeer in its half-domesticated state. Dresses such as these are very common among the Russian colonists, who, like the Samoyeds, wear them open before and so short as only just to reach to the hips. A high conical cap of black sheep skin with two long strips hanging down at either side of the head and uniting on the breast, along with a collar of squirrel skin, constitute the rest of the apparel of the Russian peasants here. The district between Pokrovsk and Kainsk is one of those low and broken parts of the steppe, which are distinguished at once, even in wintertime, by wide tracts of reeds that force their way through the snow. These swamps, the remains of inland seas, render the vicinity exceedingly dangerous for summer residents, and cause much annoyance even to the traveler at that season. The flies and gnats become then so tormenting that it is impossible to venture abroad without a covering for the face, and the cattle even are obliged to be smeared with tar. It is in the hot season, too, that terror of natives and visitors, the Siberian plague, Siberskaya Yazka, as it is called, prevails. This malady is known to cut off frequently both men and cattle in the course of a few days. It is, however, much less feared now than formerly, as it has been found that punctuation with a needle upon the exposed parts of the person will, if promptly resorted to, always prevent the extension of the irritation and swelling which invariably accompany the progress of the disease. Wow. Wonder what that was and why that was spreading. Antoshkina and Bulatova are two miserable settlements of convicts, and maintain the character for insecurity which this side of the Baraba had earned for itself before Kainsk was built for the protection of travelers. We entered Bulatova at nightfall. Still there appeared nothing to justify the apprehensions of our yamshiks, who hurried us past the miserable cottages at full gallop. The external aspect of Kainsk is gloomy and repulsive. It contains nothing but mean and ill-built huts. I determined to remain there a short time in the hope of being able to make some astronomical observations, but was disappointed by the sudden outburst of a snowstorm. This guy seems cool. I like his writing and his style. He seems to know a lot of different things. The settlers' dwelling in which we were lodged was far more dirty and miserable than those of the generality of the Siberian boors. The whole family lay crowded in a single apartment, furnished only with the common boiler, and encumbered with confused heaps of old peltry and articles of clothing. Very different is the state of things on the other side of the lake of Ubinsk. There the villages lie close together, and the houses, regularly built, have little balconies before them, and the windows of mica, neatly fitted in large plates, which, with the well-finished wooden railings round the courtyards, give the dwellings an unusual appearance of respectability. That sounds awesome. This district, as I was informed by an old resident of Chuluim, who was 95 years old, had been nothing better than an uninhabitable waste up to the year 1753, when he arrived from Kazan with a numerous colony of crown serfs, by whom the first habitations were erected in these parts. Up to the present day, the population has been continually on the increase from the influx of convicts, who are hired out to the elder residents as servants and laborers, till they are in a situation to form household establishments for themselves. These unfortunates, for so they are termed, generally conduct themselves, as I was assured, with great propriety, and in the course of a very few years merge into the general mass of the inhabitants. In Itkul, Setkinsk, in the succeeding villages which we passed through on Sunday morning, January the 18th, we found the people, notwithstanding the severity of the cold, all up and busy in preparing to celebrate the New Year. The young women were dressed in their holiday clothes and driven 6 or 8 together in sledges by the young men at full speed from one end of the street to the other, the turn at each end being made with astonishing adroitness. The carol in which they joined was taken up by the young peasants who rode by, not in the sledges. These cavalcades were followed by numbers of large dogs, the barking of which, joined to the screams of laughter and the plaudits of the lookers-on, added greatly to the excitement of the scene. This is the same custom which sets the sledges in motion on the Neva at this season in St. Petersburg, and which gave existence to the preparations on the ice which we witnessed in Tobolsk, and which is, in fact, observed with similar rejoicings in every quarter of the empire. It is rarely that the festival can be enjoyed with more zest or present a spectacle of more unusual interest to the stranger than in the icy region of the steppe of the Baraba. So I wonder if they're referring to the Chinese New Year or a completely different New Year, because this is already mid-January, so it's not the New Year we're used to. So I bet it does, and I bet that's why the dragon kind of comes in, and it's probably connected with the moon of some sort. But these people were all connected, and probably where we robbed many of our stories. Who knows? The dogs kept by the Russians of Baraba show their affinity with those bred by the Ostyaks, not only by their size, but also by their make and color. They are about the height of a full-grown wolf, with bushy tails gracefully curled, differing from the former only in the greater length of their hair and less sharply pointed ears. I bought one of them at Itkul, and he followed me to the west coast of Kamchatka. His speed at the New Year's sports, just described, had attracted my attention. His coat was white, beautifully spotted with black, but he had a black tail with a white tip. I was afterwards informed by Tungusian connoisseurs that this variety, or at least the individual which I possessed, have great natural capability for speed in consequence of their ribs being set very far asunder. A little further on we met a great number of one-horse sledges from the circle of Baisk in the government of Tomsk, laden with large cylindrical vessels of honey for Tara. This alone would be sufficient to refute the oft-repeated assertion that there are no bees in Siberia. Wow. Honey is also found in great quantities in the government of Yenisei. The snow upon our route had now assumed that wavy condition of the surface which is the result of constant traveling. Sharp parallel ridges occurring at half a horse's length from each other, they are produced by the treading up of the snow under the horse's feet and extend across the entire road, for here they yoke abreast, and it is only in the more northern parts, where the tracks are difficult to find, that they have recourse to the goose file. January 19th brought us early in the morning to a considerable village named Kuti Logi, the steep valleys. Here first we came upon a wooded, hilly country, as the name implies, traversed in the neighborhood of the settlement by deep ravines trending to the northward. Here the steppe terminates. The inhabitants of Kuti Logi call themselves miners, because they are obliged to supply charcoal and means of transport for the smelting houses of Barnaul. Their own land is, notwithstanding, well cultivated. Every house in the place has its enclosure, which is cropped in summer as a vegetable garden. Smart. The next post station, Kolivan, has lost the dignity of the chief town of a government, which it enjoyed till the close of the last century. A few of the buildings lately erected carry something of the air of a city. All the rest are merely log houses, as rude and untrimmed as are to be found in the villages. They lie in a row on the heights, while the Obi flows like a mountain stream through a narrow chasm at their feet. A seam of clay slate crops out of the sand at a great angle with the horizon, and is pronounced by the Altai miners to be an offshoot of the transition formation of that chain. The crest of the ridge of hills separating the Obi and the Tom is visible in the distant south. We made a halt till the evening in a well-wooded spot on the right bank of the Obi, much delighted with our retreat after our long journey after an unsheltered waste. The woods were fir and pine, with many magnificent specimens of the Kembra among them. The nuts are gathered here as an article of trade. The snow track had now become so hard that our progress was very rapid. Testra, the dog that I had brought from Itkul, continued his attendance on his new master till we came to Dubrova, where he arrived soon after us, with his feet so cut and wounded that he sank exhausted on the snow. Hitherto I had found it fruitless to attempt to entice him into my sledge, but I had now no difficulty in reconciling him to a comfortable berth in it, which in a very few days he learned to enjoy. This forest district is inhabited by Tatars, with whom we had some further intercourse at Tataraniskaya Stanция. The pines grow close up to their huts, which are of a square form, with flat roofs, and constructed of rough round logs. These yurts are, however, higher than those of the Ostyaks, and taper slightly towards the top. so they present something of the appearance of towers, and at a little distance, among the trees, look not unlike old German castles. These people are, moreover, distinguished from the indigenous tribes of the north by their more civilized and agreeable exterior. The women, who were engaged in cooking when we saw them, wear a long white wrapper with which they also cover the head when they leave the house. The younger females, as well as the men, are slight in figure and have regular and expressive figures, but they soon get a look of age, and wrinkles disfigure in a few years their yellow, haggard faces. Towards night we came to Oyash, a well-built village with large and new courtyards. We observed some blocks of coarse-grained granite lying on the banks of a rivulet, which rises in the hilly grounds adjacent. These were the first stones which I had seen to the eastwards of Samarovo. In the fruitful tract which we traversed on the 20th also, the Russian population seemed to be prosperous and comfortable. At Varyikuna, for instance, 50 versts from Tomsk, one of the peasants had provided a great baking of honey cakes, pryaniki, for sale during the Christmas. This branch of industry seems tolerably remunerative here, judging from the demand from the European dainty, which was as much in request as the Kembra nuts. So, just a lot of different culture, a lot of different things, a lot of different observations that are pretty unique, pretty interesting, I feel. I mean, again, we're not observing the Tartars with the giant buildings and the giant castles. Like, that time is got to be so long gone, especially by the 1850s. But even in the 1600s, 1700s, when we see engravings of all those buildings, they're not in their prime at that time either. So it really makes us wonder how old those buildings are. They can always put a date on them, like beyond our comprehension. You know, you put it any further than 1600s and we really have no idea. Any further than 1900s and we pretty much have no idea, but any further than that we have no idea. And then they keep going deeper and deeper. They could be so old, all of it. Who knows? This present world is just a constant reminder of how easy it is for them to manipulate millions, potentially billions of people, for them to basically retell history. The winner just always retells. So who knows? And people have been moved. There's been convicts. People migrate. Populations mingle. But at one point, I have to wonder exactly when it happened. And you know, the flood stories do add up. The stories of intense radiation blasts or other things add up. But something, or more likely so many things, had to conspire in order to just give us the rubble that we see all over the place, these mountains, these things. At what period of time was it all in their prime? Did each hilltop have a castle on it overlooking? Did vimanas fly in the sky? Were gods traveling around? Were people building these palaces and adding the crystals and amazing metals onto them, forging the metal, making these bells? Like in this book, they talk of a 30-foot high bell. That is absolutely insane. And what would that do? What were those people? Were they giants? They pretty much had to have been. And just what time period was this? This is what we need to find out. Like, we, as all over, I mean, every state in America has this. The whole West, the Colorado, that whole area, so many places around there, Utah, everything. Just so many signs that there was a massive civilization. And you know that if a civilization was that massive and that advanced, that they were all connected, they were all able to go travel everywhere within a reasonable time, communicate within a reasonable time. Even that receiver on that telephone wire was definitely primitive of something much greater at the beginning of that video. And just so much that we don't know, that we have to figure out, and we have to envision this prime time and when it was, because they give us little hints, but they've jumbled everything so far together that we just can't see which way is which, and we have no idea what the timeline is, who was who, what was what. The names don't add up, nothing, but certain things linger and certain little factors kind of get passed on and see. So hope you find any value in these observations. I'm going to do another one from this book right after this, so you can check it. I just didn't want to make this video too much longer, so the next one's got a whole nother topic, which I find kind of interesting, a little tattooing. So we'll see. Bless you all. Thank you again.